Jorge Joestar. Chapter 12. Rhinoceros Beetle. When I told him Jorge Joestar had died of cancer 2 years ago, Carr said,
"Oh, luck was always on his side."
"If he was still alive, would you have sought revenge?" I asked. "He'd be an old man, nearly 100 years old."
"I would indeed. After all, the man sent me into space 37 times. I won't feel free from that fate until things are settled between us. I've spent nigh eternity dreaming of placing a stone mask on that man, turning him into a vampire, having him devour others, and finally eating him myself."
Stone mask?
A tool that turns humans into a good source of energy and nutrition. Mere humans are hardly enough to satisfy our appetites. Turning them into vampires makes them far more appetizing, and drinking blood makes them young again, and much stronger. I'm sure Jorge Joestar would make a pleasingly delicious vampire.
Desperately trying to look calm, I listened to Carr's terrifying story, my mind reeling. A stone mask? That turned humans into vampires? Was that even possible?
"Humans are a life form with possibilities,"
Carr said.
"You could do almost anything if you simply tweak their brains a little. Changes to the brain change the electric currents. If the electric signals change, the blood changes. If the blood changes, the bones and organs and skin, and all the rest changes. Jorge Joestar, you are quite lacking in height compared to Joseph."
Lacking? I wasn't lacking. Certainly I was shorter than my grandfather, who was over 190 centimetres, but I was taller than the average Japanese man. As I thought this, Carr reached his hand out to my head. I froze, and his fingers slipped into my head as easily as an airplane slips into a cloud. "Ah!" I squealed, but I was afraid I'd die if I moved, so I had to stay perfectly still.
"Don't worry. The brain has no capacity for pain,"
Carr said, and pulled his fingers out of my head, leaving no holes or any sign he'd reached inside me. Just as I was starting to feel relieved, a weird sound came from my throat, and my head snapped sideways of its own accord, and I thought maybe that sound wasn't me swallowing, but my neck breaking, and then snap, crunch, crack, all the bones in my body started twisting in all sorts of crazy directions, one after the other. But it only looked horrible. I could feel the vibrations running through me, but no pain. My knees and elbows bent backwards, and my wrists spun the wrong way, and it seemed obvious all my bones were breaking, but apparently they weren't, and I was fine. And I was about 20 centimetres taller. Huh?
"See? I know the human brain,"
Carr said.
"I could also make wings grow from your back."
He started to reach his hand out again, but I ducked under it. "I'm fine."
Humans are a fascinating species. They seem like they're constantly striving to become something else, but they resist actual change. Most likely they simply enjoy imagining things. That's what I like most about the human race. They are the only ones who imagine, who create, who make stories. When I was living underground, I gathered the stories humans had written and read them. Humans are the only species that enjoy things that happen to others of their kind. At first, I had no idea how they were enjoying it. Our brains had no concept of emotional investment, of putting ourselves in others' shoes. It wasn't easy to do. My race was complete as it was and satisfied with that. And as a result, they lacked ambition, made no progress of any kind, and lived a life of stagnation. But there's a difference between being actually sufficient and simply not knowing that something is insufficient. I came to understand that we weren't perfect. We just hadn't noticed that we weren't. We lacked even the ability to realize this fact because we had never compared ourselves to anyone else. Because we expected nothing from anyone else and made do entirely with what we already had. But I noticed, reading human writings and learning to enjoy them sent new electric impulses through my mind. I knew then We never stopped to think about our own potential. We were certain our species was the pinnacle of all things, and thus we'd stopped progressing. This was the first time I ever felt dissatisfied, the first time I'd ever questioned myself. That quickly led to frustration, to anger, and that frustration and anger pleased me. It was what you'd call a eureka moment. I was furious with myself, and that was cause for celebration. It was proof that I, too, had potential. And looking back, I was baffled by how I'd ever lived without doubt, without dissatisfaction. We could never set foot in the light of the sun, could never know the world above during the day. We were trapped in the world underground. I couldn't bear it any longer, so I quickly began exploring my own potential, my own brain. Everything begins with the brain. To study our brains, I began killing my own kind like we killed humans. I killed them, split open their heads and examined their brains, as I suspected we had potential. In order to investigate closer, further, and with more certainty, I killed a great many more. But murder itself didn't really pose a problem among my kind. After all, none of them cared for anyone but themselves. Sometimes I even killed in front of others of my kind, but nobody said anything. They had no emotional investment, no imagination, and I slowly realized just how appalling that was. If someone attempted to attack us, to conquer us, and we attacked it with such disinterest, that could be the end of us. We would be annihilated by our own self-satisfaction and arrogance. Fearing for my own safety, I continued my studies, created the stone mask, stretched my brain, and conquered the sun. And not only that, I created a perfect body for myself, one superior to all other living things.
Huh? So, how's not dying?
There's a lot of time.
The question I'd asked absently hit directly to the heart of things, and Carr's whispered response had an air of such grim realism I almost started laughing, but he was watching me suspiciously. Whoops. If he thought I was mocking him, he might get angry, and in such close quarters, well, it was about 3 times the size of the H.G. Wells, but there was still nowhere to run, and I'd no hope of standing against him. Okay, I thought. Was it acceptable to allow this ultimate cars to reach Earth 6 months from now? Of course not. After all, he ate humans. He also turned them into vampires, but either way, he was clearly the enemy of mankind. Sure, there wasn't a rule that humans shouldn't have any predators. Yet as a human faced with such a threat, I felt obligated to do what I could. But this predator was immortal, so I couldn't just kill him. Could I somehow blow up the ship? No. He was smart enough to take the Jotos apart and build them into this ship in the blink of an eye. We didn't have any powerful explosives at hand, and even if we blew it up with Das Boot, Carls would just kill Narancia the moment he realised what we were doing and the stand would vanish. As the thought crossed my mind, there was a sonar ping from inside me. Das Boot had snuck inside my body again, without Carls noticing. I glanced at Narancia. The boy's eyes were totally those of a Mafia veteran. He was going to try something before he got eaten. With Das Boot? It could only move inside living tissue and stands. Wait, part of the ship was made from the extra cars. He could move through that. That must be how he got the submarine inside me without touching me. What else could he do? But before I could think of anything else, Cars said,
"What's this?"
I looked over, and Cars had his hand inserted into his own chest. He felt around inside himself, then pulled his hand out with one of Narancia's submarines held in it.
"Is this a machine? Has human technology created boats that can go inside the body?"
Oh shit, I thought. Neither Narancia or I had even begun to understand how ultimate the ultimate thing really was. As if proving that, Cars sat down on the floor and took Das Boot apart as we watched. His fingers moved with such unhesitating precision it was as if he'd built it himself. First he heated the tips of his fingers like a blowtorch, making a line across the outer walls, and after peeling them off he divided it into engineering sections, living quarters, control rooms and missile storage. Tiny hands had come out of the tips of his fingers, and were turning and operating every nut and screw, leaving the entire plumbing system intact. It was like he stroked it and everything divided itself into pieces, lined up in neat rows on the floor, down to the individual spoons in the kitchen or the springs in the beds. When it came to the monitors in the control room or the computers in engineering, he not only took them apart, he also analysed the structure.
Some sort of visual data,
he muttered, putting the computer back together. He plugged the cord into the palm of his hand and opened his mouth. A beam of light emerged from the back of his throat, and a thin membrane appeared between his jaws, turning his mouth into a projector. The information flowing from his palm was transferred into a thin cellophane-like paper, and projected onto the wall across from him. It was a sexy photo of a naked woman. Narancia shrieked, turning bright red. Stop! Stop it! What the fuck? God damn it! He was in such a tizzy he forgot all about shame and fear and threw himself at Cars, trying to cover up the lens. But Cars easily lifted him, spun him round in the air, placed him flat on his back on the ceiling, and tied him there with cords and pipes. Below him, Cars kept on projecting. Ka-chunk, ka-chunk. With an analogue sound, like an old slide projector, image after image displayed, every single one of the same naked girl. I said stop! Yo! This is morally wrong, damn it! Please, Mr. Cars, I really fucking need it! Narancia was so worked up now, his nose had started bleeding, dripping down from the ceiling. I was definitely starting to feel sorry for him. Cars, these might be personal memories. It's not the best manners to display someone's precious, and no sooner had the words left my mouth than the next picture showed that girl on the cover of a magazine. Huh? Wait, are these all pin-ups? Ah! How dare you! My Trish Chickalata! Narancia screamed. Now I placed her. Trish Chickalata was a famous porn star who'd become a member of the Italian Parliament. She was famous even in Japan. She was middle-aged now, but these were all up from when she was young. I glanced up, accidentally meeting Narancia's eye. What, motherfucker? You better not tell anyone about this or else I'll fucking kill you! Let me down, Cos! If I get free of this, I'll kill all of you! He screamed, spraying spit and nose blood. You can like whoever you want, I said weakly. This didn't appear to comfort him at all. Shut up! He roared. Shut the fuck up! Fuck you all! He then began trying to spit at me. I dodged, laughing. What the hell were we even doing? Cars turned his mouth projector back into his normal mouth and said,
So this machine has come from inside your body. Have human bodies become capable of making machines?
Die, Cars! Narancia yelled, now just spitting furiously in all directions. Cars ignored this completely. He stood up and reached his hand towards Narancia's belly. Afraid he'd die if Cars dissected him looking for the factory, I hastily yelled, No, Cars! It exists as a machine, but it's something else entirely. Cars stopped his hand and looked at me.
What do you mean?
It's called a stand. It takes the form of a machine, but isn't one. I only just learned about them today myself, but stands are something ordinary humans don't have. A special power, like telekinesis or telepathy, or psychic powers, but much more varied and complex. They can look like people, animals, plants, or machines. Only people who have stands can see them or touch them. I just happened to have found someone who made it so I could see and touch stands, but I'm not a stand master myself.
Then I can use stands too?
Well, I'm guessing you can see and touch them because you're the ultimate life form. I trailed off as Cars held his palm up in front of his chest, and a submarine surfaced from inside him. It was a different design from Narancia's dust boot. I looked up at the ceiling, and Narancia appeared to be shocked, speechless. Cars had just spontaneously developed a stand. Cars said, staring at his stand.
I understand now.
Whoops. We were fucked now, I thought. Everything was possible for the ultimate being. He could absorb anything without limits.
Since it's my own power, I can easily grasp what it can do,
Cars said, and an explosive sound echoed through every inch of my body. It was so loud I covered my ears, but since the noise was inside me, I couldn't block it.
It seems you really don't have a stand,
Cars said, and I was relieved my eardrums had survived what I suddenly realised was an extremely loud sonar. My ears were still ringing. This was nuts. I turned towards the groan and saw Enrico Pucci writhing on the floor, clutching his hands to his ears, his face screwed up in pain. He must be getting the deafening solar treatment too.
There's something in you,
Cars said, striding over to him. Despite his injuries, Pucci tried to scramble away, but was moving too slowly, and there was nowhere to go. No. Cars ignored his hoarse pleas, bent over and stuck his arm in Pucci's back. Pucci screamed, and Cars began dragging a humanoid stand about the same size as Pucci out of his back by the neck.
Cars said, examining it. This looks like a man, but he's no man, nor any animal. What is it? Why are there letters written all over its skin?
Shit. Shut up! Do it right, Snake! Pucci yelled. His stand turned and punched Cars in the cheek. Cars' head rolled sideways with the blow, and a disc popped out of his head. But not one or two, but a flood of them, bubbling out of his head, spilling ceaselessly onto the floor. Pucci froze to the spot, horrified. Even as more discs poured out of him, Cars turned back to Pucci and said,
So this is your stand's power. Fascinating. I understand it.
Huh? Before I even had time to be surprised, a humanoid stand emerged from Cars' back. It looked like Pucci's Whitesnake, but it was bigger, and had 3 heads and 6 arms like a statue of Ashura. The middle arm on the right punched Pucci's face, and 2 discs came out. Cars looked mildly surprised.
Only 2?
Discs were still spilling out of his own head with no signs of ever slowing down. They were forming quite a pile.
Let's see.
Cars picked up one of Pucci's discs and placed it inside his own forehead.
I see. White Snake. A stand that can turn memories and stand powers into discs and steal them, and control people by writing to the discs,
he said, once he'd finished reading Pucci's stand disc. Stop. Police, Pucci said.
How did you get this power?
Cars asked.
Were you stabbed by a special arrow? Long ago when I was on Earth, there were occasional people with special powers, and I made a tool that could pull those powers out of humans. A bow and arrow. I barely used it before I began slaughtering my own species. In theory, that bow and arrow can trigger a reaction. To protect their own lives from the fatal wound, their talents would blossom, the energy would heal the wounds, and they would discover special abilities previously hidden within them. Has something like that pulled this stand out of you?
Without waiting for Pucci to answer, Cars pulled the memory disc out of him, knocking him out, and placed it in his own head.
It seems my bow and arrow was not involved, but the theory's not wrong. The devil's palm. While the body hangs between life and death, only those with a stand lurking inside them will be saved.
I'd heard the legends of the devil's palm, a holy spot somewhere in America that moved itself from place to place, and those that wandered into it were either chosen or died. Cars sighed.
But everything else is quite dull. There's nothing to be learned from human memories. They lack attention to detail, their thought patterns are shallow, and their recall is shockingly poor.
He reached up to pull the disc out. He said, pausing.
What?
Then he took the disc out, slammed him back at Pucci's head, glanced at me and laughed.
Thanks to him, 6 months will take 4 hours. Aren't you lucky?
Huh? We both gaped at him, but he turned his attention back to Pucci, who'd woken up again.
You dare. I did not write a message on the outside of Jojo. I did not throw it down to Earth. Think on that. Who prepared the metal plate that killed your family?
Huh? What? We'd all assumed the notes about the way to heaven had led us to the back of Mars, where we found the Jotos and Cars, and all of us, myself included, had assumed that was key to finding this heaven, so this revelation threw me for a loop. But who else could have prepared that metal sheet with a message on it? Who had dropped that from the sky onto Pucci's house? And how? They hadn't just dropped it on his house, they'd wiped it from the face of the earth. Who else could do that?
Think about it,
Cars said.
If I could throw a metal plate down to Earth, I'd have flown down myself. This is impossible. Even if the metal's treated to be heat resistant, there's no possible way a single metal plate could survive all the way from space to the surface without burning up. I know everything about the Joto's heat shields. No matter what angle it entered the atmosphere, it would melt in the stratosphere. To begin with, They've obviously only applied the heat-resistant treatment to the outside. The back of the plate is ordinary metal and would melt away first, and they've even carved letters into the front of it. That would ruin whatever effect the treatment had. Why is it humans choose to blind themselves the moment things cease to make sense? Why can't you stop yourselves from being so stupid you ignored the facts that don't fit with your desire to believe this was a message from space?
But the strangest part was, nobody else had noticed the meteor falling. That's what Funny Valentine had said. That should have caught my attention. It was more than just strange. But looking things over again, how could throwing an iron plate leave a 17-metre crater? That seemed unlikely if it hadn't been travelling as fast as it would have if it was coming from outer space. But that's only if it was thrown normally. What if it wasn't thrown normally? Thrown by someone not normal, using a not normal throwing technique?
Come now, remember the sky,
Cars said, annoyed by Pucci's silence.
Even with your pathetically low recall, you should be able to manage that much. Remember him.
Huh? When Pucci just gaped at him, Carr spat.
Look!
And turned his mouth into a projector again, beaming an image onto the wall. Ka-chunk! The evening sky, orange and purple mingled. A single dot against it. Ka-chunk! That dot enlarged, clearly human-shaped. Ka-chunk! The humanoid form enlarged, but with the sun at his back, his face and figure were in shadow, impossible to make out. Ka-chunk! The contrast adjusted, illuminating everything. The man floating in the air was muscular, with long limbs and a barrel chest, even features twisted in a wicked grin. I knew that man. No, I didn't. I don't know why I thought I did. He was white, and looked like no one I'd ever seen. Long narrow eyes, a strong jaw, full lips, and 3 moles on his left ear. He was handsome, but there was something inherently evil about his face. His smile let us catch a glimpse of 2 long, sharp fangs. He didn't seem like a stand master. He didn't even seem like a human.